Hey everybody, Ruben here of the Blue Pepper. Today I'm going to show you a tutorial on how I make a knife out of an old saw blade. My last video I showed you this saw blade and it had a profile drawn on it, so there's that profile there. And so I will show you how I do it. And here's the materials you're going to need. With a cutoff wheel on an angle grinder, it's relatively easy to cut this metal, this blade out. One thing you want to do is you want to cut just a hair bit larger than what your profile is, because if you make a mistake, it's easier to take off, but you can't put it back on. All right, take that, put that in some water so I can touch it, because that metal's hot. But there's the profile. So now we just got to clean it up, smooth out the edges. I mean, it looks pretty good like that, right? And go from there. Okay, so I've changed the disc from a cutting wheel to a sanding disc, which is 36 grit, onto my angle grinder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the profile of this knife. So, safety first, put them gloves on. There's nothing worse than touching hot metal unexpected or getting a metal shard in your fingers. And unfortunately, I've had that experience. And safety goggles, people. Well, there's my profile on my knife. And I forgot to do one thing, was cut off this little piece here on the end, but that's not going to be too difficult. Just put it on the cutting wheel again. It's still very rough. Got a lot of burrs on it. Just gonna watch out for that. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to use my bench sander. Well, my sander. Smooth this out and put a bevel on the blade. Let me show you that. Alright, so here's my belt sander, and I'm using the 50 grit sanding disc, sandpaper on this thing. And what I'm going to do basically is going to smooth it out, edges, take out all the burrs, and then start using the sander to start putting the bevel on this blade. Now, I've done this a couple times, so I'm doing it barehanded, and the reason I like to do it is because I want to feel the heat on the metal. If it's getting too hot to where I can't hold it, or starts to feel like I can't hold it, I'm gonna dunk it in water. And the reason why I do that is not to mess with the temper of this. It's all relative, but here I go. Okay, before I start my bevel work, I just cleaned it and polished it up. Got a lot of the rust and crud that was on here before I started. So you can see it's semi-shiny. Got a lot of the stuff off of it. And if you didn't notice, when I was sanding the handle here, I did it in two directions. I did it first at this degree, and then I turned it and did it at this degree. If you can notice, you see the cross hatch on there. What I did that for, basically for textural purposes. So if I decided I want to put a wooden handle on this, it would help the epoxy or the glue that I use to adhere to the metal. But I think this one I'm going to wrap with paracord. So now onto the bevel. Okay, so I've put the bevel on this blade. You don't want to sharpen it. You just want to put the bevel on it, so after you harden it, it's a little bit easier for you to work on. The type of bevels that I like on these type of blades, I've heard it's called a butcher's edge, whereas one bevel is fairly shallow, where the other bevel is fairly sharp. So if you're looking at it, it's one is much more angular than the other, and I found it works very well for sharpening these blades. So now at this point, you want to take it over to your fire and harden the steel, and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, so you see as I got a pretty good hot fire in, what I'm going to do basically is just lay this steel in there and wait till it comes up to temper. And how we're going to test it that it comes up to temper is we're going to use that little magnet that I showed you. And if the magnet does not stick, then the knife has gone all the way up to its temper. Quench it with the oil. So I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, so I know you probably can't see it, but it's getting pretty hot down there, and I've got it between two pieces of hardwood. I'm using oak and eucalyptus, so that stuff burns pretty dang hot. And you may not notice it, and it doesn't look like, you know, when you would see on a forge, but I'm using my smoker for this, and air, it's right over the top. Can't really, if you can see the grill mark down there, just right in that area right there, that's the grill, and the air is flowing up from the top. And there is my, what's supposed to be the hot box when I use smoking, but air is sucking up through there and coming up, and it is getting pretty dang hot in there. So I'm going to check my metal and see if it's hot enough for quenching. Okay, so now I'm going to use my telescoping magnet to touch it, and if the magnet does not stick to it, then I know that metal's up to temper. And yep, the magnet will not stick to it. So I've got to get in there and take it out by hand. So as soon as I pull that out, I'm going to quench it in that oil, can of oil right there. Now some people say, you know, preheat your oil, blah blah blah. I've done it with cold oil and I don't see any difference in my blades. But yeah, oh boy, that sucker is cherry hot. Here we go, got it right there, and then just quench it right in that oil. I've done a couple other knives, and when I've quenched them inside this oil, it's flared up. But fortunately, this one did not. So I'm going to leave that in there for a little bit longer, get it cooled down, and then get the magnet and pull it out. Okay, let's see if I can find my blade in there somewhere. There it goes. There, I got it. All right, here's the knife. Let's walk it over here to the bench. All right, so as you can see now, it's quenched, and let me get this cleaned up and show you how hardened it is. Okay, so here's the blade cleaned up. It's got some dark spots on it, obviously, and it misshaped a little bit while it was inside that fire. You can see that little bend right there. That's easy. You take that out. A little bit of light hammering, not too much, because right now at this stage, even though it's hard, it's still brittle. And now we need to temper the steel by putting it in an oven at 400 degrees for an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I'll do that and be right back. Okay, so I've already taken it out of the oven. I've hardened it, and it's not exactly a real sharp edge yet, but I put tape on it just for my protection. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap a handle around it using this this rope. And what I do is basically I take it, mount it to my workbench, and start the wrapping process. And what I do is after I go the very first wrap around, which I start all the way up at the top where your finger is going to be when you grip onto the knife, and I tuck the end down underneath it. Get it as tight as you can. Let me show you what that looks like. So you see how the end there is tucked underneath? That keeps it nice and tight. Alright, let's continue this project. Make sure you can still see what I'm doing. Okay, so now we're just going to wrap around the knife. And then when you get close towards the end, you know, like 3 wraps or so, you're going to want to stop, because then you want to make a knot. Well, not really a knot. You want to thread the end of your rope through so you can have it cinched in so it doesn't want to come back out. So that's about right there where I want it to be. And what I do is I take another piece of string, another piece of rope, thinner than what I'm using. In this case, I'm using baling twine. I take that baling twine, I lay it down over the rope, and then I start taking the last 3 or 4 wraps and going over the top of that rope. And I'm not going real tight because I need to be able to pull that rope through. So the next thing you do is you take that loop that's there, take your string and put it through that loop. And what I did was I put a knot at the end of this loop, because a knot at the end of this rope, because I want to loop at the end, and I'll show you what that looks like. I lost a couple of wraps there. Okay, so I'm now all the way at the end, pulling that through. Now I'm taking the rope, not the rope, but the baling twine, and I'm pulling that through. Let me show you what that looks like, if I can. So you can see there's the last 4 wraps. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the baling twine that was wrapped underneath this rope here. That was a very large loop. This is the end of the rope right here through the loop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all this through here. Now, when you're doing the last 3 or 4 loops, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, you don't want to go that tight, because if you do it really tight, then it's going to be extremely difficult to get those last, to pull that rope through. And sometimes I count on the assistance of a screwdriver to kind of hold it up so I can pull that rope through. It'll just manipulate it, and eventually it will go. There we go. Alright then. So, pulled it through. So this is the part that's pulled through now. There's that knot I had there, and it stopped right on there. So I don't need this piece of baling twine anymore. So what I'm going to do basically is just pull the rest of the cord through and tighten up this part right here. So do that. Make sure that goes over the knot. Trying to hold the camera and do this at the same time. Okay, but you get the idea. There's a loop on the end there. So now I'm just going to pull it taut, get it all nice and tight. Take some of that slack out from the last couple of winds around the handle. Okay, so get that nice and tight. So now what I would do is put some crazy glue on the points down there and down in here to make sure that the rope sticks, or epoxy. I'll epoxy the whole handle. Hot glue, just something to keep the end from unraveling. But there it is with the lanyard on it. Now I'm just going to sharpen it.